Okay, well, I'm sorry. I said that this thing had to happen 50 days from Tebeth 21, 2017, which would be Adar 11, and we're now Adar 19. My logic was not incorrect. It's the first Asheraian Pentecost, or actually Baalian Pentecost, arguably, after Tebeth 21, 2017. It's just that these things are counted in weekly Sabbaths rather than sequential 50 counts. So you go to the first weekly Sabbath after we became Asheraian, or after the Watchtower became Baalian, and you then count your 7 Sabbaths, then you count your Pentecost, and then for the next one you will go to the next weekly Sabbath, which puts a 6-day gap in the proceedings, and then you count the next 50 count. So in fact you're counting your 56s. So that would extend it from Adar 11 to Adar 17. But then in 2 Kings 1, it's the 50 is sent, and the chief of 50, it was literally sent from Azariah to Elijah, but the scripture says he sent to him, so it can be reversed in the greater meaning. And so I send to the king of the Watchtower these Asheraian and Baalian Pentecosts and the chiefs. Now, finally we understand, or I think I understand, why it says in 2 Kings 1 for the second 50 that it was he sent a following chief of 50 and his 50. I used to misread that as a following 50 and the chief of his 50, but it doesn't say that. It says a following chief of 50. And it's such a precise book. So the chief of a weekly Sabbath counted 50 count, you'd imagine, would be the 0th Sabbath from which the count begins. That would be the sort of leading chief. Then the trailing chief would be the Sabbath at the other end, which is in fact the leading Sabbath on the next 50 count. And you feel that perhaps that isn't a good chief because it's discombobulated by 6 days, but those 6 days don't exist to the Pentecost. The Pentecost stops on the first day of the week and doesn't count anything until the 0th Sabbath of the next Pentecost, which again it doesn't actually count, but it is counted from, so it's part of the equation where it's day 0 of the next 50 count, but it's also is just as valid as a chief since it's over the 50. It's the next Pentecostal related day over the 50 count. Arguably it's counted if you say you count the 0th Sabbath, which I think is a fair argument. So you've got 2 choices with the chief. It's either the chief at the beginning or the chief at the end, but it says a following chief of 50, so it's the chief at the end. So the chief at the end of a weekly Sabbath counted Pentecost is the next weekly Sabbath after the Pentecost, which is 6 days after the Pentecost. So now we can add a further 6 days to the preceding, having already added 6 days by going to the weekly Sabbath. So going to the weekly Sabbath counted version adds 6 days, and going to the following chief adds another 6, so it adds 12. So that would take you to Adar 23. And the incredible thing about this is that that is actually the 3rd fireside date. In other words, it's as far as it could possibly be without breaking the interpretation. That the other thing is we're saying I thought we became Asheraian when we made 1 no-show prediction. Now I'm saying we became Asheraian when we made 2, because you need 2 witnesses to establish anything. So we were fully established as useless prophets once we'd made 2 mistakes, 2 no-show predictions. And we made our second no-show prediction for a warning bomb. And these predictions for a warning bomb, we didn't know where the bomb was. It wasn't at a specific location. It wasn't the destruction bomb in the US that would cause a problem for the Watchtower. It was just we thought there'd be some kind of a warning that this was all going to occur in those days. Now we understand that warning is more likely to be the spies turning up, or Peter turning up, or some divine nice event rather than a bomb. And that's our present interpretation. But the first no-show prediction was ER 21 2006, and the second was ER 28 2006, because in ER 14 we suddenly got the idea, go back 7 times and there's the bomb, so that was ER 21. Then on ER 21 we realised it was a no-show, so the attendant, which is the whole church, basically said to me, look, you got it wrong, there's a no-show. And I said, well, let's go back 7 times, that'll take us to ER 28, and maybe there's a bomb then, and there wasn't. And that was a Sabbath. So if you count 76 weekly counted Sabbaths from there, you get to would you believe, 2017 Tebet 21, which isn't later than 2017 Tebet 21, it's on Tebet 21. And the way 1 Kings 18 works is you go back 7 times, which are now years, not days, and not from ER 14, but from 2010 Tishri 21, when I went up the mountain and we were appointed over the Gentile call 2 NCs, as was the attendant. We were appointed separately over the Samaritan call 2 NCs, but together over the Gentile call ones. So if you go back 7 times, you end up on 2017 Tebet 21. But that is the 76th weekly Sabbath counted, 2 witness Asheraian Pentecost from our second no-show prediction on 2006 ER 28. It is also the 83rd Baalian Pentecost from the fall of the Watchtower in 2005 ER 14, which wasn't a Sabbath, but ER 20 was a Sabbath. So you actually count it from ER 20 in counting 7 Sabbaths, and then the Pentecost, and then the next Pentecost starts on the 8th Sabbath. So both the Baalian 83rd and the 77th week counted 2 witness Asheraian, they both of those Pentecosts were actually the very day of 2017 Tebet 21, and so you can't use them. You have to go to the Pentecost after going back 7 times, and that will be the 77th Asheraian and the 84th Baalian, and they're both 2017 Adar 17. But then what 2 Kings 1 actually says about the second 50 is Elijah spoke to them, the chief of the 50 and the 50, and said, let fire come down from the heavens and eat up you and your 50. Whereas in the case of the first fire sign, he spoke to him and said, let fire come down from the heavens and eat up you and your 50. Now, the first fire sign was on Mount Carmel in Israel, and it raged. It was a fire, and it caused a cloud on that mountain by the sea, because the mountain is at the sea. This cloud was rising from the sea. It's just a cloud of the fire, which was the worst fire in modern Israel's history. And this cloud started on Chislev 2010 and went to Chislev 23. So the part of the fire that occurred on Chislev 20 did not consume the chief. It actually consumed the Pentecost, because to the Pentecost, which was Heshvan 21, was the 2 NC Pentecost. The days between Heshvan 22 and Chislev 20 don't exist. The next counted day is the late Pentecost, which is Pentecostal day, which is Chislev 21. So having a fire sign on Chislev 20 is as good as having it on Heshvan 21. So the Chislev 20 part of that fire sign consumed the 2 NC Pentecost. The Chislev 21 part of that fire sign consumed the chief of the 2 NC Pentecost. But it was one fire sign that raged for several days that consumed both the Pentecost and its chief, and that was him speaking to him, Elijah speaking to him, the chief of the 50. But in the case of the second 50, he speaks to them. So that means there are 2 fire signs. One, which we believe is the UK fire sign, which consumes the 50 count, which means it happens either on Adar 17, which it didn't, or Adar 18, which it didn't, or Adar 19, 20, 21, 22, all of which days the Pentecost is blind to Pentecost count. Well, that's what it means. It happens between the 17th or the 22nd, up to the 22nd. And that would consume the 50 count, the Pentecost, the 77th Asheraian, or the 84th Baalian. And then on the 23rd is the Adar 23rd is the following chief, but the trailing chief, which is the Sabbath after the Pentecost. That's the Sabbath coming at the end of this week. That is the 3rd fire sign, which will be consumed by a nuclear bomb on that date, or a very large explosion, but we think it's nuclear. In the case of 2 Kings 1, in the first 50, and fire came from the heavens, but in the second 50, it's the fire of God came from the heavens. So that the fire of God we interpret to be nuclear, whereas fire is just the regular fire that was on Mount Carmel. So that is technically, we think we've now taken account of every jot and tittle and every particle of every letter and every number and every, singular or plural, in 2 Kings 1 and 1 Kings 18. So that's the most accurate interpretation we can give, that there's a UK fire sign between Adar 17 and Adar 22, which is March 10 to March 16. So it's from Saturday, March the 10th, 2018, to Friday, March the 16th, 2018. That's the UK sign. And that would consume the Pentecost, which is an Adar 17, the 77th Asheraian. Well, since the Asheraian fulfillment must come first, we take that as consuming the 77th Asheraian Pentecost. But then the 84th Baalian Pentecost, the chief of that Pentecost, the following chief, that's Adar 23, and that will be consumed by the US fire sign, which will occur on Friday, March 16, Saturday, March 17, which is the Sabbath at the end of this week. So that is our new interpretation, and it's as far as we can push this. Now, we've still got to remember that Esther 9 says that on the 13th day of Adar, 75,000 people get killed in the jurisdictional districts and 500 in the sort of palace districts. And we understand it, we interpret them all to be Jehovah's Witnesses, because it's the jurisdictional district of the Watchtower, basically. And because Ahasuerus in that account is the 12th year of Ahasuerus is the 12th year of the Watchtower after they became a false church. I'm not sure about that interpretation, but in any event, without a doubt, it's Adar, and it's the 13th day. Now, it can't have been the 13th actual day, because we've had that, but it can be the 13th festival day, and the festival days, including weekly Sabbaths, and monthly Sabbaths, actually, and annual Sabbaths, are Adar 1, 2 is weekly Sabbath, 9 weekly Sabbath, 14 for the Passover, cakes is 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 20 Assembly 22, and the Sabbath of 23. So the 13th festival day is 2017 Adar 23, when we now have the third fast. So that sign, or at least on that day, 75,000 people will die to the Watchtower and ask to join the Lord's Witnesses, or at least resign from the Watchtower. We can't baptise them all on one day like that, but they certainly can leave the Watchtower on that day. And Esther, we can't throw away Esther, and it can't apply to next year. It would break loads of other scriptures based on real dates, like, for instance, the 12 baskets of fragments, filled baskets of fragments from the end of the Watchtower, whole filled baskets of fragments. A fragment is a whole calendar month. The Watchtower fell 2005 to ER 14, so they run from 2005 Sivan 1 to ER 30 2017, and it's not 13 whole baskets, so they have to stop feeding 1NC reserves by ER 29 2018, and so you can't extend Esther all the way out another 9 months, 10 months to Adar 13 2018. You can't do it, so it's got to happen. And then of course we have the 11 times of Abraham's times, 11 prophetic times, running from 1943 Nisan 14 for 3,960 days, 11 times 360, 11 prophetic times, 11 years of days, to 2018 Nisan 14, and that's when the first Passover execution occurs, so that God begins the process of physically removing Adam from the planet and handing the kingdom to Abraham. By what shall I know that I shall gain it as a possession? And the answer was this 11 times sacrifice, gain the kingdom as a possession, asked Abraham of God in Genesis 15. So, for all those reasons, Esther must be right, and this game must be over by Adar 23. Now, the contest day ends, however, on Adar 21, but that is the 11th day of the 1,000-day secular Sabbath, when we rule with the Christ. LW Sabbath, we had a 6,000-day sacred working week, beginning 2000 Kislev 21, ending 2017 Shabbat 29, with 188-day Zoe installation gap, because we died 2012 Sivan 14, and we were resurrected. We were reappointed. We were resurrected on Sivan 16, non-Adamically, but we were reappointed 2012 Kislev 21. That introduces a 188-day gap when we weren't working for anybody, because we were not appointed by God to work, or installed by God to work for Him, actually. So our 6,000-day working week is extended by 188 days, and that takes it to Shabbat 29. And then you start the sacred Sabbath, the 1,000-day sacred Sabbath on Shabbat 30, and then the 11th day of that is when you start the secular Sabbath, which was, well, actually Adar 10 was when Jesus, the 11th day was when Jesus got appointed Caesar, so the secular Sabbath is whole days, it runs from Adar 11. And then on the 11th day of that secular Sabbath, that is Adar 21, which is the end of the contest of 1 Kings 18, which is the end of the contest of 1 Kings 18, and is the last day of late Laodicean cakes. Now, Laodicea escaped from the Watchtower on Shabbat 21, which was the last day of Laodicean cakes from their Laodicean Passover on Shabbat 14. But then there's a late Laodicean Passover on Adar 14, coincident with the first Watchtower Passover on Adar 14. And it takes them 30 days to row in their boat, 30 stadia of John 6:19 before they get here. So there's two escapes that they achieve, the Laodiceans. The first is to get away from the Watchtower, the second is to escape into Zoar, which is the whole idea. And that second escape is achieved on the last day of late Laodicean cakes, Adar 21, which is also the 11th day of the 1,000-day Sabbath, and that is the day that Peter turns up here. It is also, confusingly, 4,250 BLC days after Sivan 1, which was when we made our first prediction that failed for a US bomb. We made one also on ER1, but we revised that and abandoned it so that we left it before it failed. The first one that actually failed was in the revised sign of Jonah letter made on 2006 Sivan 1. You count 85 straight BLC Pentecost, straight 50 counts from there. That's 4250 days. You get to 2017 Adar 21. So for those reasons, and because actually Peter is in the Laodicean boat, when Joshua in Joshua 5:13 meets the chief of the army of Jehovah, he goes to see the chief. The chief doesn't come to see him. Joshua raises his eyes, sees the chief of the army, and goes to see him. And when he sees him, he says, "Are you for us or for our adversaries?" The reason he says that is that this chief is with the adversaries in the greater meaning. He's in the Laodicean boat, basically. So I have to go there to see him. I can't do that till I know where the boat is, which I will hear about from the spies, presumably, who have to come before then. Well, they haven't come today, so we need to see them tomorrow, I guess. Well, they didn't come yesterday on the 18th, I meant. So we should see them today. And that's important in order that I can baptize Caleb, in order that he can baptize Jonah on Nisan 2, which is Adar 26. So you'd have to be installed to do that from today, Adar 19, to Adar 25, 7 whole days, in order to, on Nisan 2, which is Adar 26, start the temple, which he has to do in accordance with 2 Chronicles 3:2. Otherwise I'd have to baptize Jonah, and I don't think I do that. I think Caleb does it because he's supposed to control Laodicea and be the patriarch of it. But there's one more beautiful thing that we recently discovered. Well, several beautiful things actually. Now that the second presence ended on 2012 Tishri 10, that's when Laodicea lost its 4 EC water baptism, which is the perfect day for them to lose it because it's Atonement Day. So we were no longer divided into the Lord's Witnesses between 2 water baptized congregations. They lost the baptism they stole, therefore it was just a case of Lord's Witnesses getting back authority over all the water baptized people. There weren't many of us, but at least we were at one. Now that means that the second presence lasted for 77 months less 4 days, from 2006 ER 14 to 2012 Tishri 10, or up to 77 times, for which Peter has to forgive his brothers who are in the second presence, because Peter's a 1NC. So there's your 77 times of forgiveness from Peter. Not only that, but the contest now lasting 77 Pentecosts. Peter has to forgive all the fence sitters for watching this contest and being undecided as to whether God would win it or Baal would win it, for 77 weekly Sabbath counted 2 witness Asheraian Pentecosts. But there's something else which was really cute, which was this. The scripture in Daniel 8 says that 2300 evenings and mornings, the vision of the constant feature and the transgression causing desolation. And then 2300 evenings and mornings, and the holy place comes into the right condition. Now the constant feature of this church has been our website, and I registered the name. Initially it was BibleDecoded.com. I registered that name on the 28th of October 1999, which was Heshvan 50. Now in those days it took a while to point your name you'd registered, the domain name you'd registered, at the hosting site so that you could actually upload something to your website. I can't remember exactly how long it took, but it was the order of 4, 5, 6, 7 days, something like that. I mean, if you were very good, you'd get it done in 3, but normally it was up to a week. Let's say we managed to get things uploaded on Heshvan 21 6 days after I registered the domain name. I mean, it was that plus or minus 1 or 2 days. Then you count 4,600 solar days, 2,300 evenings and 2,300 mornings. 2,300 evenings with associated mornings and 2,300 mornings with associated evenings, like staying 7 days and 7 nights. That could be 7 24-hour days or 14, could be a 14-day holiday. So you count 4,600 solar days, and you get to 2012, Sivan 16, when we became non-Adamic, at which point this temple came into the right condition. So that's a lovely proof of the start of Zoa. The other amazing proof, which I'm yet to really get a proof of, but it is quite astonishing, is that Zoa lasts for precisely 7 years. I mean, the Zoa Passover was 2012, Sivan 14, and we became non-Adamic on Sivan 16 on the 3rd day thereafter. And then Zoa ends on 2019, Sivan 14, at the Zoa Passover, when it should end now. So it lasted 7 years, and that must be in Scripture, but I don't think I've yet found a convincing proof of it, but it must be there. So there's a lovely take on another 4,600 days of Daniel, although I'm not quite sure what the transgression causing desolation is, other than I must have committed it, because we got all these maledictions. We didn't get the wilderness penalty, but we got the Gentile alienation and exodemic malediction, so I must have committed some kind of a transgression causing desolation. But anyway, the constant feature is our website, and that means that even though one is not supposed to, on a sacred Sabbath, upload stuff to the web or submit new interpretations to the church administration, I can do it because it's a constant feature. So I can update our website on the Sabbath because a constant feature happened every single day. So that's the latest update. Thanks for listening and thanks for watching.